Hello, hello, hello. How are you guys doing today? Happy Sunday. It is late Saturday night going into Sunday, and I thought that I would come out here and film a video so that I have something to post for tomorrow so I can kind of enjoy the day tomorrow with my husband and my dog. This is the first video that I'm filming late at night this summer already. I can't believe it. Fernalicious is in the house. Her new little sister Farah is in the house. And yeah, it's good to be back out here on the front porch filming again. I don't think that I have filmed a video late at night out here since last fall. Brought my Diet Dr. Pepper with me, some ice in my Tervis cup. I thought I'd just have a little conversation with you guys. Spent a lot of time out here last summer making videos late at night talking about Colleen Ballinger and the victims of Colleen Ballinger and James Charles and the victims of James Charles. And I think that anybody that's watched my videos for any amount of time knows how seriously I take those allegations and how much time and dedication I have spent on those two specific topics. The topics of Colleen Ballinger and her victims and James Charles and his victims. I've spent a lot of time researching it. I've spent a lot of time talking about it. I know a lot of people are tired of me talking about it, and so yeah, so it's kind of funny that this is going to be my first video back talking about this, but I made this video earlier today, and I'm saying that ahead of time because I think that anybody that has watched my channel for any amount of time knows how seriously I take the story of a victim, and that I side with the victim because I think it's the right thing to do, right? And so I made this video earlier today. I actually made two drama videos. If you guys watched the video, I explained that. And the video was about Jeff Wittek and Tana Mojo being in a hot tub on Jeff Wittek's podcast and talking about James Charles. And actually, I think the podcast is called something about exposing James Charles. And they have his picture. Jeff Wittek has James Charles' picture in between he and Tana Mojo in the thumbnail of the video. And I had gotten several messages from people about this, and I actually put up something on Instagram asking people for topics that they wanted me to talk about. And several people said, you know, did you hear that Tana Mojo and Jeff Wittek, you know, came out and exposed James Charles for, you know, like further allegations and hitting on Jeff Wittek and things like that, right? So I watched the clip that I saw on Instagram, and I sat down and I made a video. And the video was very much pro Jeff Wittek and Tana Mojo, and very much, well, I would say very pro Jeff Wittek. I feel like Tana Mojo has been somebody that has, she plays whatever side is convenient for her for the views and the clicks. I don't think she really cares about any of these issues. I don't think Tana Mojo really cares about the story of the victim. I don't think she takes it seriously. I think she says whatever is the hot trending side to take at that moment, and I think she's evidenced that over time. If Tana Mojo really felt seriously about the things that she says, then there would be action behind her words. And like I showed in my video that I posted earlier today, she still follows James Charles. So the fact that she wants to get in multiple podcasts and talk about how problematic James Charles is, that she wants to, you know, say to Ethan Klein that she'll call into the H3 podcast and denounce James Charles, on and on and on. She still follows James Charles on Instagram. She still fully supports James Charles. She was in his PR marketing campaign for Painted. He showed up at her house and things like that. She even came out later and said that she was very uncomfortable filming that. Well, of all those reasons, you would think that that would be a reason to unfollow somebody, and yet she still follows him, right? So, you know, Tana Mojo says whatever is convenient to her at that moment. That's the popular opinion. So I would say that the first video that I made was very pro Jeff Wittek, okay? And in this whole situation and talking about that, and it was just like, it was literally like a 30-second clip that I saw from the podcast. And honestly, I went back tonight and I watched most of the podcast, and that's the only part where they talk about James Charles. There's not a whole lot more where they talk about James Charles in there, right? So I sat down and I rendered the whole video, I uploaded the whole video, and I was making a thumbnail for the video. And actually, I was just going to take a clip from the podcast and like use that and put a picture of James Charles in the middle of it. And I thought, well, let me go back and look and see if there's any pictures of Jeff Wittek and James Charles together, or Tana Mongeau and James Charles together. And those were the pictures that I used in the thumbnail. But when I was looking for those pictures for the thumbnail, I started seeing these articles where they were talking about Jeff Wittek and the Vlog Squad and David Dobrik had done this video with James Charles, and that James Charles had been like thirsting over Jeff Wittek for a very long time, and that he had a crush on him, and that he had even come out later and done another video with Jeff Wittek where he explained that, because people were speculating whether or not they were in a relationship, and they got in this video, and that was just the two of them. And I didn't say that in the earlier video, but I read all these articles about this, right? And in one of the articles, it said something about Tana Mongeau had tweeted out in 2019 that, I showed this in my earlier video, that it was her goal to get James Charles and Jeff Wittek together, right? And so I found it very interesting. I found it very interesting that here they are, flash forward 5 years later, when at that time, James Charles, like did this video with the Vlog Squad, and there's a scene at the end of it that he goes through, has everybody from the Vlog Squad do his makeup, and then Jeff Wittek is the one that finishes it, right? And there's a scene in there where they're checking their mics underneath each other's t-shirts, or underneath each other's shirts. And I think Jeff Wittek has like a sweatshirt on, and James Charles has like a long shirt and another shirt underneath it. And I referenced that, right? And talked about how if Jeff Wittek didn't want him to do that, he should have said something and whatever. And I knew when I got into this video, and I'm asking you, listen, I've done my research on this, okay? And please watch the whole video, and I'm not asking you to agree with me. You don't have to agree with me, And I say that in a lot of videos, and people are like, if you don't agree with Peter, then he'll block you or delete your comment. I think this video is at least one video that should serve as an example of the fact that I don't do that. There are a lot of comments that are disagreeing with me. There are a lot of comments that are saying, Peter, like, I respect you, but this is not the stance, and I don't agree with what you had to say in this, and all this kind of stuff, right? So I started finding these articles, and I was like, okay, so Tana Mongeau at the time was somebody that was feeding out this story that she wanted to get James and Jeff together. Jeff was playing into this story, okay, and all this kind of stuff. And, Jeff even references Kevin Spacey, and they even talk about, like, P. Diddy in the podcast and things like that, right? And so I'm like, okay, so you're taking the situation, because in the clip from the podcast, what they say is that, Jeff says that James Charles called him and asked him to come over to watch a movie and some other weird stuff, and then he turns that into very, like, it's Kevin Spacey-esque, okay? And I was like, to myself, I was thinking, that's kind of a leap, right? Like, that's kind of a leap, that somebody calls you up on the phone and they ask you to come over and watch a movie with them, and you take that to, and I'm not saying that something couldn't have happened, okay, and that Jeff wouldn't have liked that. I'm just saying that that's a leap to say that somebody texts you on the phone and says, hey, would you like to come over and watch a movie, and you take that to that extreme, okay? Now, I knew that making this video earlier was not going to be popular. I knew it was not going to be a popular opinion. I think anybody that's watched my videos for the last several years, and especially in the last year, okay, knows how hard I come for James Charles and the predatorial allegations, the predatorial proof. I mean, he came out in his own video and said that he apologized to his victims, which were 14 and 16, okay? I've talked so many videos about how James Charles has allegations of coercing straight men into sexual situations, sexual conversations, on and on and on, okay? I've said that time and time again. I think people know that that's my stance, right? So, for me, one of the things that I've talked about in this story was that James Charles made 2 videos. And the only reason I'm sharing this is because this is the important point of what I was trying to convey in my video earlier today. And apparently I didn't do a good job conveying that, or I don't know, maybe people didn't agree with it or whatever, right? But when James Charles came out with his original video called Holding Myself Accountable, okay, he apologized to his victims, all right? He talked about the power differential in there. He talked about that he understood all of that. He then took that video down. He came out with a video later later, and the video later was called An Open Conversation, okay? And it's a get ready with me. In that video, he explains the past situation, right? He waters it down, but he still takes a little bit of accountability, but it's very watered down, okay? And in that video, he basically blames a drama channel, who at the time was Deaf Noodles, for coming out with false allegations, okay? Fake allegations that were not true. And at the time, what was happening was Deaf Noodles was keeping a list of all of the allegations that were happening, that were coming out towards James Charles, okay? And so let's say if, 10 of those, I'm just making this up, but let's say if 10 of those allegations were true, there were like 40 that had come out, okay? Well, what James Charles did was he used those false allegations as a defense, all right, to say, this is a pure example of that I'm not that person. I mean, you can literally find clips of him almost saying this thing, right? That people are always trying to make up stories about me. People are taking things and they're running with them and saying that this happened when that's absolutely not what happened at all, right? And on and on and on. And so that was what I was trying to convey, that this is a dangerous situation, okay? And this is where I feel like that this influencer space can be kind of messy, all right? So I put this video up, and like I said, I knew it was not going to be a popular opinion. I think I even said that in the video at the beginning. I think I said something to the effect of that. I think people are going to be kind of surprised of my opinion, all right? My opinion was in no way defending James Charles and blaming Jeff Wittek. I think that that was what came across and what people heard. One of the things that I have been very, very aware of for my entire time of being on YouTube is that how somebody perceives a video, a YouTube video, how somebody perceives a song, how somebody perceives a book, a movie, a TV show, very much has a lot to do with their own personal experiences, okay? With whether or not their personal experiences have history of traumatic situations, or maybe they have friends that have had traumatic situations, or they're advocates for people that have been in traumatic situations, or whatnot, right? I myself have certain responses to certain things that I watch, all right? And I said in my video earlier today that we live in this outraged society when what's important to one person might not be important to somebody else. Well, that's all because of the personal things that we've gone through in our life. And that might not even be because we experienced it. It might be because our sister experienced it, or our best friend experienced it, or our neighbor experienced it, right? Or that we're an advocate for that, or we've heard somebody else's story, and so we take that very seriously. I was in no way in my video, and I am not apologizing. This is not an apology video, okay? Because I think people need to go back and hear what I was saying. But I also want to clarify what I was saying, right? Because this is very, very important. I take the story of the victims very, very seriously, okay? I take the allegations against James Charles very, very seriously. I take the allegations against Colleen Ballinger very, very seriously, all right? One of the reasons why I have thought it has been so important to talk about James Charles in the last year and bring it back up again is so that what happened to him, with him having the platform that he has today, and his platform, and the size of his platform, and the power that he came out and said that he realizes that he has this power, is how he was able to abuse it, okay? It's the abuse of power. Colleen Ballinger has been able to do the same thing, right? So if Colleen Ballinger down the road has another thriving career like James Charles has today, other people are going to get hurt. That's going to happen. I have not witnessed from Colleen Ballinger or James Charles any amount of change or growth whatsoever of what they have demonstrated online for me to see, okay? So I take this very, very seriously, okay? To the point where if somebody came out with a false allegation, I would not cover that story. I want to make that very, very clear, okay? If somebody came out and they had a proven false allegation about James Charles, I would not give that story or give it any credibility if it came out that it was found to be false, okay? Because I think it's important to focus on the truth, right? You know, and I've explained this in the past. People ask me, like, why I didn't cover the story of Colleen Ballinger and where people were accusing her of having blackface, and she actually said it was, her lawyer came out and said it was green face for the show part that she does and all this kind of stuff. One of the reasons why I did not address that was because it had nothing to do with the victims that were affected by Colleen Ballinger, and it was a deflection tactic for her attorney to use this one thing that she actually could defend and say it was green face instead of blackface to deflect off of the stories of the victims. That's how, and I never covered that. I may have mentioned it in some videos, but I never covered it, specifically, right? Because it is important to stay on the facts. I feel very, very seriously about this, okay? So I made this video today, and I'm like reading through the comments, And it's like some people are like, oh, this is a good take, or I agree with you. And then it's like, oh, this is rather victim blaming. And then other people are like, oh, this is rather victim blaming. This is really victim blaming, okay? Other people are like, this is victim blaming. This is like fawning behavior. What he's doing is fawning behavior. So I'm like, okay, whew. This is going deep, okay? Now, we are now, like, let me just read you some of the comments. I'm just going to go through it, okay? I mean, the video's been up. Hold on a second. Let me see how long the video's been up for now. The video has currently been up for 5 hours and 3 minutes, okay? And it currently has 97 comments on it. And I'm just going to read you some of the comments on here, okay? Love you, Peter, but I did not like your take on this. And I, too, like some others that commented, felt like you were victim blaming Jeff, okay? The next comment, this feels a little victim blaming. It's not uncommon for people to allow things to happen out of shock or uncomfortability with confrontation. The power dynamic could also, goes into explain all this kind of stuff. And this person was very, I mean, they're all very nice comments. I do not say this to be confrontational, but more to say simply that there could be reasons that he allowed it, but that doesn't mean it was something he wanted. Somebody goes on here talking about other stuff that I talked about in my video. Hold on a second. Let me get to the next ones. I love you to death, Peter, but I truly feel like it's a privilege to feel comfortable standing up for yourself in uncomfortable situations. Not everyone can do it, and I can't do it. I can't do it at all, okay? I said in the video that if I were Jeff and on video, right? Like, I think the one thing is that I make videos and I'm like one take, right? Like I edit off the beginning and the end of it, that's it. Okay, we're talking about contrived edited videos where there's a lot of people around, and I'm not making excuses for that, so please hold, because I have done my research. Research that took me 20 minutes to do. So anybody else could have done the same research that I did, okay? As people were saying that I was victim blaming. After a year, okay, in defense of victims, a year, to the point where I have gotten so much hate, okay, over taking the side of victims, that I have stood up for the victims, and I have received so much hate, so much nastiness. I have had people literally write me and be like, I am unfollowing you because you are continuing to defend these victims against Colleen Ballinger that are making up lies. You continue to defend these people against James Charles, a 14 and a 16-year-old at the time, right? That I've had, like, tons of people write me and say, I mean, you guys have no idea how horrific the things are that people have said to me behind the scenes, out of defense for the victims, okay? I think we know I'm probably somebody that checks my my victim blaming at the door, all right? That those are things that I think about. This isn't just something that I just get in a video and go, oh, let me come up with this, and this is what I think, and Jeff Wittek did this, and Jeff Wittek did that, okay? I even said in the video, and I even said in there, I feel sorry that James Charles hit on him. I said that. Go back and watch the video. I shared my experience of working for the LGBTQIA+ community for over 30 years. I shared my experience of having straight men as friends, okay, and knowing not to overstep boundaries. I talked a lot about that, right? So I was a little surprised. I wouldn't have been surprised if it was one comment or two, but I mean, multiple conversations on here about this. Somebody said, I've definitely been in uncomfortable situations where I've played along to avoid conflict, and I want to say, I totally understand that, okay? I have been in situations where I go along with it to avoid conflict. In fact, I actually just talked about this in a video the other day on one of my channels, and I've talked about this story multiple times through the years. It's not a new story. That in my old work environment, I worked with a small group of men. It was mostly women, but I worked with a small group of men that would make gay jokes. And I went along with those gay jokes for a long time, and I would just be like, because I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to stand up to these heterosexual men that were 10 to 20 years my senior and be like, hey, I think that's disrespectful to me as a gay man that's standing here. And yes, I was out in the work environment, you know, and to say that to them. And I finally one day was like, I'm not laughing at the joke anymore. And as soon as I stood up for myself and I said, hey, I don't think that's funny, when they made a gay joke, and they go, well, come on, they just, you know, smacked him on my shoulder, come on, we're just making a joke, it's just funny, and it didn't feel funny. And I said, it doesn't feel funny to me, and I can't laugh at it. Well, they had a problem with that. They didn't like that, okay? You know, just last fall when I came out and I talked about people coming for me was not the first time in my life that I've had to attempt to stand up for myself. I know how difficult it is. You know, I'm a person that is sober as an out gay man, okay, that has to deal with this every single day. Do you think it's just a sober person alone? I don't find myself in uncomfortable situations. Oh, you can have just one drink. Just come on, you can have just one drink. You can just have a choke off this joint. Come on, you can just have a hit. You can have a hit. Come on, you can have a hit. Just take a pill. Just take a pill. You think I don't deal with that on a regular basis when I'm around people that I don't know very well? All the time, okay? Or people asking me ignorant questions. And I decided a long time ago, ignorant questions about sobriety or ignorant questions about being gay, which one of you or your husband is the catcher and which one's the pitcher? As if I would ever look at anybody that is a married heterosexual couple and ask them if they do it up the butt in the bedroom, which is exactly what they're asking, okay? And I know that that's kind of funny, but the fact that we think that's okay to ask a gay couple that, but we would never ask a heterosexual couple that. You would never ask a heterosexual couple, a married couple. My husband and I have been married for 15, almost 16 years, okay? The fact that anybody would think that it's okay to ask questions like that. Yes, I've been in very uncomfortable situations. People don't know my past history of abuse either, okay? My own being a victim. I've shared some of the stories online, but not all of them. So yes, I completely relate to the story, okay, of going along as a trauma response because you're so uncomfortable to stand up for yourself. I totally understand that, all right? So let's get into some of these comments further, right? Somebody said, Peter, it's not fair for you to blame Jeff for letting James stick the mic under his shirt, okay? Surely you know that when one of the many things people do when they're uncomfortable and scared, they comply. It's the sad truth, but it's true. Jeff probably felt he had to do it, so James wouldn't do something to him. Now, I'm not sure what you're implying that James would do to him in that situation. Some people came out and said that if Jeff didn't go along with it, James would come out and say that he was homophobic, okay? And I understand the people's discussion of the power differential, but at that time, James Charles was over here. Jeff Wittek had David Dobrik in the vlog squad. There was like 10 of them, okay? If you watch the video, it's all of them and James Charles. So if anybody at that time would have come out and said, if James Charles would have come out and said that Jeff Wittek was homophobic because he wasn't taking on, first of all, okay, I don't know what kind of society you live in, and I'm telling you as a gay man, I've lived in those situations before, okay? If I were to hit on a straight man and they were not to take my advances and then to come out and I would say, well, he's homophobic and that's why he's not taking my advances, okay, you would have to back that statement up. Well, how is he homophobic? What things has he said to you, James? I mean, he would have to come out with evidence, right? Which is what my issue was with this to begin with. So I don't buy that for a story that's what Jeff Wittek was doing here. Do I think that Jeff Wittek was going along with it because it would further his career? 100%. He actually says that in the podcast. The podcast that I made the video about, that apparently nobody chose to go watch because it took me, that part of the video, which you can scan through the whole video, I watched him talk about all this kind of other kind of stuff, right? They talk about all kinds of stuff. And I watched all of it. And there's a part right in the middle. You can scan to it. It took me 20 minutes to do this. I literally watched that part like 4 times, okay? I also went back in and I watched the Vlog Squad video with James Charles. And if you want to do your own history of this or your own research, I have the video screenshot right here. The video is called, hold on just a second. Well, the first video that he does is doing the time relay with the Vlog Squad. The second video that he does is called The Truth. My Crush Does My Makeup, okay? And it's him with Jeff Wittek. And in here he says, underneath here in the description box, James says, "Hi sisters, in today's video, I wanted to finally clear the air. After my video with Jeff, we've gotten thousands of comments asking if we're dating. So we decided to address it while Jeff clams me up. Jokes aside, this is one of my favorite and most real conversations I've ever had in a video. I hope you enjoy." But the miking situation actually happened in the Vlog Squad video. So I want to get to that in just a second because I watched that back as well, okay? So somebody else said, I don't even understand what that comment says. "I don't think I can finish this video. The victim blaming undertones are kind of triggering. I don't think that was your intent, and it's not your fault how I feel about it. I just gotta take it." And I totally understand that. Peter, your victim, I mean, these are right in a row. Peter, your victim blaming, his reasons are his reasons. So he came out now. If this was a woman, would you blame them? What about Sean Combs' victim? So now we're relating James Charles calling up or texting Jeff Wittek, the Sean Combs allegations, okay, of being abusive towards a woman. We're comparing that, and Jeff Wittek is comparing Kevin Spacey to James Charles texting him and asking him to come to a movie. I just want to be clear about this, okay? Because if I'm going to go on and I'm going to report about this further, and I'm going to continue to talk about the victims of James Charles, if Jeff Wittek is a victim of James Charles, then I want to be very, very clear about this. I want to make sure that I understand what everybody else out there is seeing, okay? Because I don't see it. So I want to make sure that I understand this. Because if we're going to compare, okay, based on Jeff Wittek's story, James Charles to Kevin Spacey, or James Charles to P. Diddy, that I want to make sure that the evidence is there to back it up, okay? Because this is how these people get out of these situations. They go, see? there's no truth to these allegations. This is all made up stuff. And then when people start questioning one allegation, they start questioning all the allegations. And that's how James Charles has a career today. That's why this video was so important for me to make, okay? Okay, wait. Okay, I definitely don't agree with this take. People can have trouble with confronting their harasser and still be the victim. You said James was harassing Jeff, but then you said Jeff was leading him on. Just because someone didn't speak up and say they were, okay, and there's a bunch of responses underneath there. I mean, it goes on and on and on about, not you victim blaming, somebody said, that has 7 likes on it. Somebody said, I asked on there about membership, so a lot of people are commenting on that, okay? I'm going to give Jeff a little grace because I can see the people around him saying, yeah, it's just for YouTube, and James not wanting to believe it's all a joke. Then somebody went on and said, if Jeff didn't respond well to James, James could have easily twisted the narrative that Jeff was homophobic and ruined his career. I can see the motives to why he would have been hesitant to speak up, okay? And then somebody said, that's why James Charles' takedown was necessary. This is exactly why I'm making this video, okay? Somebody said in here, where's the one that got a lot of comments? Okay, to be honest, some people's trauma responses is to fawn. I love you, Peter, but just because you're comfortable enough to vocalize when you're uncomfortable, that's not the case for everyone. Now, she's referring to Jeff Wittek, saying that he was fawning in this situation, okay? Especially in this particular industry where James has a significant amount of power and pull, and years ago, Jeff wasn't even in comparable situation. I don't think it's fair to get that on his ass for changing his tune about things. That's the growth we look at for these situations. Change isn't always until she goes on about all this kind of stuff, and I appreciate you educating me on this. He only admits to being in a totally different mindset and not only wanting, okay, so it goes on and on and on. And somebody said, I know Peter means well. I've been watching his videos for a while now, but what you're mentioned above, he completely misses a point like that because I think he forgets to put himself in other people's shoes. I put myself in other people's shoes every single day, okay? It's actually something I was just talking about in a video before I even saw this, right? So then somebody said, I don't necessarily think it's fair to blame Jeff for him letting James go under his shirt to find his microphone. As people, we do a lot of things when we're uncomfortable, and sometimes it's complying. And somebody said, I second this. It kind of felt like victim blaming. I get what he was trying to say, but as a woman myself, it can be uncomfortable to reject someone, especially so publicly, and I totally understand that, okay? Somebody said, especially because you know how sensitive people can be and possibly label him a homophobe. It did feel a bit victim blaming, and so people go on in here, and then they're talking about fawning again in another comment, okay? So I was like, well, let's look up what fawning is, because a couple people said that Jeff Wittek's behavior around James Charles is fawning, okay? So I wanted to educate people on what fawning is, because we've now taken, and I'm going to also tell you in a second, the truth about what Jeff Wittek said, okay, in the podcast, and the actual truth of the Vlog Squad video and everything else, okay? Because I went back and I looked to make sure that I was correct about my information. So I hope that everybody else out there that's calling me victim blaming, comparing James Charles in this situation, I'm not saying that he's not, okay? But in this situation with Jeff Wittek, that they're comparing him to Kevin Spacey and comparing him to P. Diddy and things like that. I hope that we all did our research, okay? Because this, in my history of doing drama on YouTube, is how people get away with stuff. And people want to ask today, how does James Charles have a platform? This is a prime example of how James Charles has a platform, okay? Because people start saying all this kind of stuff, not to me, okay? I can handle it. I can handle the comments of you're victim blaming, you're victim blaming, you're victim blaming, because I know what I'm doing, okay? But then when that story gets out there and that story gets multiplied, and what the story is Jeff Wittek is a victim of James Charles. And then people are like, well, I don't really remember what he did to James Charles, or what James Charles did to Jeff Wittek, but Jeff Wittek came out with Tana Mojo, and they said that James Charles had victimized them, okay? And then that adds to another list. And then this grows up and this becomes huge. And then there's 4 more allegations after that. And what James Charles does is he says, well, like the situation with Jeff Wittek, well, Jeff was my friend. We had done a video together on the Vlog Squad. We actually did another video where I glammed him up and we dispelled any rumors. So I knew at that point that he knew that I was fully aware that he didn't have a crush on me and I had a crush on him and he knew that and we were just friends and it was good. And after that, I thought we were just friends. And so I texted him like I would text any of my other friends, like Lipstick Nick, who I throw up pictures with all the time watching movies. You know, or my other male friends. And I thought, well, I'm just going to ask him if he wants to watch a movie. And so I texted him innocently, do you want to watch a movie? And he said no, right? Because Jeff Wittek never says how he responds to it. That's what I said in my video. I wish he would come out and tell us what he said to him, right? And And then James will say, and see, this is how allegations like this that are completely baseless in any kind of fact whatsoever get turned into a very serious situation. And I'm not in the wrong about anything. I literally just ask a friend, somebody that I thought was a friend. He's taking this to a whole other level and weaponizing this against me. I thought he was a friend. I was just innocently asking him if he wanted to watch a movie. All he had to say was, no, I don't want to watch a movie with you. Okay, fine. But now he's alleging that I overstepped boundaries by asking him to a movie. And this is what's happened with all these allegations. That's what he can say, right? And then he says that, and then it minimizes all of the other serious allegations. This is going to stop. Hold on a second. I actually thought this would be kind of a quick video, okay? So we have now taken this to the level, we have no idea what's going on in Jeff Wittek's mind, right? But we've now made it into that Jeff Wittek is a victim of James Charles, to the point where we are now describing his behavior in the vlog squad and online, not just for one video, not just for one moment in time, but for weeks on end, okay? That he is now displaying fawning behavior as a trauma response, okay? We've now diagnosed Jeff Wittek to do that. Jeff Wittek has never come out and shared a lot about that. In fact, the trauma that he experienced from David Dobrik happened after this, okay? I want to make that very clear. So fawning is a trauma response. I read numerous articles about this. It's a response to childhood, it's usually a response to childhood trauma. It can be a response to any kind of trauma, SA, any kind of like serious trauma like that, but it's usually a response to that trauma. So here, let me read you this article, okay? Is fawning a trauma response? What you need to know. Fawning is a people-pleasing trauma response meant to avoid conflict in the short term, but it can negatively impact long-term mental health. And then it goes on and talks about all this kind of stuff. What does it mean if someone is fawning? If someone is fawning, it often means that they are trying to cope with complex trauma from their past by appeasing others, sometimes including an abuser. So now what we're assuming is that James Charles is the abuser to Jeff Wittek, and Jeff Wittek is fawning him out of fear that James Charles is going to call him a homophobe or make advances on him that Jeff Wittek cannot control himself. But we're going to address that in just a second. When growing up in a dangerous environment, some people become aggressive, fight response, while others run away, flight response, while others still aren't able to make a decision, freeze response. According to Pete Walker, MA, complex PTSD expert, is often associated with a fourth possible response, the so-called fawn response. In other words, fawning is a trauma response where a person behaves in a people-pleasing way to avoid conflict and establish a sense of safety. Okay, so now when people are bringing this up, what we're saying is that Jeff Wittek is a long-standing, and I don't know a lot about Jeff Wittek, so if he is, this could be completely true, okay? But I'm just saying in this situation that Jeff Wittek has a long history of abuse that he's come out and talked about, okay? And I know that he's talked about some things to do with sobriety and other things like that, because I do know some of his story, right? And that in this situation, the way that he is responding to James Charles is that he is fawning, okay? And it is a trauma response based on his past, and that he's responding that way to James Charles, okay? So I just want to make sure that we understand this, because we've now taken this. This is why I didn't want to cover this story to begin with. I mean, this is like Rosanna Pansino all over again, okay? Is because I don't think people understand what I'm saying. And I just recently made a video, and something that I said in that video, it was literally 4 words or 5 words that I said in a video, was taken out of context and so misconstrued and used in another way that that's not going to happen again, okay? So yeah, I am coming out and explaining exactly how I feel about this, because this to me is very, very serious, all right? And I'm not blaming Jeff Wittek, and I'm not blaming Tana Mojo, and I'm explaining to you why I think this situation is serious and why they need to be clearer about it, okay? We're not living in the moment of the abuse, okay? That was 5 years ago, if that occurred. But Jeff Wittek doesn't even implicate that there was any abuse that occurred. He implied that James Charles texted him to ask him to come over for a movie and other weird stuff that he won't clarify what that is. We don't even know what that is. What other weird stuff? Tana Mojo asks him, okay? So I went back because I wanted to watch all this stuff, and I wanted to make sure, well, maybe I got it wrong. I often do that. When people like start saying a lot of comments in my videos, I'm like, well, maybe I got this wrong. Maybe I need to go back and look at it. I have corrected myself in a lot of videos, okay? I don't think that that's something that you find in a lot of commentary videos. I correct myself a lot if I get something wrong. I've made entire dedicated videos apologizing for things I've gotten wrong in my videos. Please go back and fact check that. I take these things that I talk about very seriously, unless they're funny haha topics. And this is not a funny haha topic, okay? I watched the entire podcast. Jeff says in the podcast that James texted him if he wanted to come over and watch a movie and other weird shit. Tana asks him what other weird shit, and he says he never entertained it. So he won't even say if that weird shit is sexual. Everybody just implies that it's sexual. We don't know what the weird shit is that James Charles asked him. James Charles could ask him, I mean, if somebody called me up and said, you want to go to an escape room? I don't care for that shit. I'd say, yeah, somebody called me up and asked me to do a bunch of weird shit like go to an escape room. Okay, so we don't know if that's what James Charles asked him. Maybe James Charles asked him to go to an escape room. Maybe James Charles asked him to go to a fashion show and Jeff Wittek deems that as weird shit. We don't know. But with that implication, what he's saying is this weird shit, and Tana asks him and he won't clarify what it is, which is exactly what I said in my video that I made earlier. If he would have come out and been more clear about what those weird text messages were that James Charles was sending him, then maybe we would have a clearer understanding if Jeff Wittek is or is not a victim of James Charles, okay? But this is what he says in the podcast, that James texted him and asked him if he wanted to come over and watch a movie and other weird shit. That's literally it that he says in the video, okay? Tana asks him what other weird shit, and he says he never entertained it, okay? He then goes on to say, he's talking about, like, he could have ended up, he goes, I mean, I could have been like one of those guys like with Kevin Spacey if I was young and had no career in Hollywood. Saying that at the time that this happened, he did have a career in Hollywood because he was working with the Vlog Squad and David Dobrik, okay? So he's saying he did have a career in Hollywood at that time, okay? But he said, what would have happened if I mean, I could have been one of those guys that sucked James Charles' dick. He says that in the video. Then he backs up and goes, that never would have happened. And his exact words are that if he ever made a move, he would have ran out or punched him in the face. Well, that's not fawning, okay? That's not fawning. That's not a trauma response, okay, to punch somebody in your face. And I'm not saying it's an inappropriate response from an unwanted gesture, sexual gesture, okay? I'm not saying that I think it's an appropriate response if somebody don't get the hint from you, okay? I think that's completely within his boundaries. But what he's saying in that moment is James Charles never did that. Because if he did that, he would have said that. He would have said, James Charles hit on me and I punched him in his face. Or James Charles hit on me and I ran out. He said it never went there. Because if it went there, I would have punched him in his face or I would have left, okay? It never went there. He then goes on to talk about, in this thing, a small part of it, about, you know, the reason that he was willing to collab with him was because he wanted to build his career. So that was not out of peer pressure. Jeff Wittek, at that time, as a late 20-year-old man, made a decision that he wanted to collab with James Charles in numerous videos, okay? He came out and did the video where he let James Charles glam him up and talk about how they weren't. He did that, okay? That wasn't peer pressure. That wasn't his fear of coming out and, oh my God, everybody's gonna call me, he's gonna call me a homophobe. At that point, okay, enough people had come out and said James Charles had that he had tried to hit on them. Enough people had come out there, okay? Jeff Wittek was well known in the Vlog Squad. If James Charles, what was James Charles going to say? Well, I made advances towards him and he turned me down, so he's a homophobe. I mean, I don't know what world you guys live in that as a gay man, okay, I mean, I can't tell you that the times that I have had to come out and say that somebody has been homophobic towards me, nobody believes it. Nobody believes it, you guys. We're not on that side, okay? Like, you have to come out and prove that. Like, where is that scene? Like, what is that doing? And this is me, again, not standing up for James Charles, all right? I want to make that very, very clear. But the story has to be taken as it's taken, or where the story is morphing into and where the narrative is going could be very dangerous because it actually could give an excuse to James Charles later to get out of further allegations. And that is what I was trying to say in my video earlier, but apparently I wasn't clear enough in it. I wasn't clear enough in it. So I wanted to make this very, very clear, okay, in this video tonight. I also went back and watched a video where James does the Vlog Squad makeup. He comes into the room, okay? When he comes into the room, Jeff Wittek, James is sitting in a chair. He comes in and he says, you look good. You look like a Victoria's Secret angel. That's what Jeff Wittek says, okay? That's not him going along with it or complying. Maybe people were reading him lines. I don't know, but James seems surprised when he says that, okay? What surprised me, because I had watched all these drama videos of where James Charles, and this is where this is dangerous as well, these past videos that have been made, these clips, okay, from years ago where they show James Charles going up Jeff Wittek's shirt. And I addressed that in my video earlier, okay? And I said a bunch of stuff about that Jeff Wittek could have said, I'm not comfortable with that and whatever. What was surprising to me when I went back and watched the video was the way that those videos were clipped that I watched, okay, from back in the day. They all show James Charles going in there. But actually what it is James Charles is sitting in a chair. If you watch the video, Jeff Wittek is standing over him. As a power differential, Jeff Wittek is the one in power in that situation, okay? James Charles is holding his phone like this. He's like, how do we do this? And James is like, well, everybody's already put their makeup on me and you're the last one that's going to put the promising touches on it and whatever, okay? And Jeff Wittek says something to him about, where are you mic'd? He doesn't ask for consent. He doesn't ask if he can touch James Charles or anything. I mean, if we're going to be fair to this whole story of James Charles, and we're going to say that these allegations of the past of a 14 and 16-year-old and several heterosexual men are coming out there, the importance is getting on the truth, okay? That's why I made the video earlier that was not popular, okay? Jeff Wittek, without asking James Charles, reaches under his shirt first. He is the first one to do it, okay? And reaches underneath James Charles' shirt searching for the microphone. It's Jeff Wittek that does it first. All right, and this has been turned into James Charles reached underneath Jeff Wittek's shirt, okay, when he was turning onto it. And I'm not going to add to that narrative. I'm not. You go back and watch the video. The video is on James Charles. You can just put in James Charles and Vlog Squad. It'll pull it all up. They're all sitting there and James is in the middle. And it's called Time Relay with James Charles and the Vlog Squad. And you will see, Jeff Wittek walks into the room, James Charles is sitting in a chair, and Jeff Wittek says to him, you look good, you look like a Victoria's Secret model, and James laughs and thinks it's funny, and then he comes and stands over him and says, what do we do? James explains the makeup situation, and then he reaches underneath his shirt and says something about the miking, okay? Now, to all the people out there that are saying that actually, in that situation, that's a questionable situation, okay? And I'm not victim blaming anybody, but then to come out 5 years later and say that you don't understand why James Charles, like, had the vibe for what? This is where it's so dangerous, right? I want to make sure that I stick to my notes, because I took these notes to say this. Okay, so how exactly, I guess I need to understand this with the multiple people that said I'm victim blaming underneath here? With all that I've given you, the details, which are the factual details, okay? And also that Tana Mojo was tweeting out that she wanted to hook James and Jeff Wittek up together, okay? Jeff Wittek was in multiple videos with James Charles, all right? Not just one, but multiple videos. He's come out and said that he was in those videos to further his career. He didn't say in the podcast, the most recent podcast he said that. The most recent evidence that we have, Jeff Wittek said that he did it to further his career, okay? He said if James Charles ever moved on him, he would punch him in the face or run out the room. He didn't say that he felt uncomfortable in those situations. He said he never let it go there. He doesn't even tell us what the weird shit is he talked about on the phone. All we know is that James Charles had a crush on Jeff Wittek, which James Charles made very obvious back in the day. And furthermore, there are a lot of videos and a lot of articles talking about people shipping James Charles and Jeff Wittek. My tripod fell backwards. Okay, there were tons of articles done at the time when I went back and looked, and I did fact check this. And there were tons of drama videos that were made, and tons of videos that were made, and people coming out, and tons of tweets of people saying that they shipped James Charles and Jeff Wittek together, okay? And Jeff Wittek played along with that to build his career, right? And I'm not saying that he didn't feel pressured to do that, or he wasn't afraid that James Charles could do that, but to get in a podcast 5 years later, when really all James Charles did was he went along with the story too. Tana Mojo fed some of the story out there. Other people fed the story with it. James Charles was honest. He said, I have a crush on you. You know, and you cut it down. And in your video, in the Glam video, you made it very clear that you had no interest in James Charles. You said that 5 years ago, okay? So now here you are coming out 5 years later when in that video, you make it very clear both of you are good friends. I don't think it's personally weird to text a friend and say, do you want to come over and watch a movie? In fact, I'm just asking my audience out there right now, okay? If you texted somebody and asked them if they wanted to come over for a movie, and 5 years later they came out and said that they were a victim of yours because you asked them to come over and watch a movie, would you be a bit surprised? I feel like, to me, and I just feel like that's a stretch with no evidence to back it up, okay? And I'm not victim blaming, because I do not hear Jeff Wittek ever saying that he is a victim of James Charles, okay? If Jeff Wittek is a victim of James Charles, what he is a victim of, okay, is people are going in here and talking about the miking situation. Jeff Wittek went underneath James Charles' shirt first. That is fact, okay? If Jeff Wittek is a victim of James Charles, he is a victim of James Charles texting him, do you want to watch a movie? Period. Okay? Well, I've texted a few people that myself in my life, and I've received a lot of texts from people. Sometimes I want to go to the movie, and sometimes I don't, okay? Sometimes I want to go to dinner, and sometimes I don't. I ain't accusing all those people of being abusers, and I think that's a dangerous line to walk, all right? And as somebody that takes the stories of victims very, very serious, okay? And they get minimized and diminished on a regular basis, all right? To come out and equate somebody for texting somebody and asking them to come over and watch a movie and some weird shit that you won't even say 5 years years later in a video, but you're going to use the James Charles allegation as the entire headline to your title of your video. Nobody's forcing him to do that today. This is Jeff Wittek's podcast, okay, that he has Tana Mojo in there. Tana Mojo that has co-signed to James Charles for years, okay? And he's sitting in a hot tub, sitting back like this, telling the story, using James Charles' picture when they talk about him for 4 minutes in a video, right in the center of it, and talks about exposing James Charles. He's using this moment of receiving a text message of James Charles, okay, that he texted him and asked him if he wanted to come over to the movie, and the entire internet is going crazy saying that Jeff Wittek is a victim of James Charles. How? Please somebody explain this to me, okay? Because the next thing that's going to happen is James Charles is going to come out and say, this is why none of these allegations are true. Somebody that I texted innocently and asked them to come to a movie with me is saying that they were a victim of mine. How the fuck is that? Okay? Let me read you the text messages that he said I was weird shit. James Charles probably said, do you like Sour Patch Kids? And Jeff Wittek said, no. Do you want to come to a movie? No, I'm not interested. What's that weird shit? Do you want to go to an escape room? No. Did he say in there that he wanted to suck your dick? Did he say in there all that kind of stuff? Because you said that you'd hit him in the face and you run out of the room. Rightfully so. But if you have those text messages, why wouldn't you bring those up in the podcast? Why wouldn't you say, James Charles texted me sexually inappropriate things long after I had told him that I wasn't interested in a video as friends, and I texted him those things, and he still continued to hit on me, because that was the story that you and Tana played up. That after multiple times of letting James Charles know that you didn't want that with him, you guys made it out. I watched the last video that you did. The last video that you guys did together. Here, I got it right here. Got a screenshot of it. The truth. My crush does my makeup. James Charles shows in the description box that he understands that you guys are, you're not together, and that you're not interested in him. I watched the video. You say in the video you're not interested in him. And you guys end the video as just being friends and hugging each other, okay? Now, if I had made that video with somebody and they texted me and asked me if I wanted to come to a movie, I would be like, well, I guess we're friends now. Everything's good. We've cleared the air. The whole internet knows we're good. You know? I'm confused about this, okay? Now, my issue with this is that the allegations against James Charles are very, very serious, and his excuse has always been the lesser than or the fake made-up allegations, and he uses those as an excuse for the overall allegations to get him out of all of it, okay? And it's very, very serious situation, all right? The reason that I wanted to point this out was that James has, this is why James has his career today. Now, if Jeff wants to share more of how James took advantage of him, I think that's totally applicable in this situation, okay? But to insinuate that James did this by a text inviting him to a movie furthers James' narrative that there's no validity to these claims, okay? I'm just asking you all out there. Have you ever received a text message from somebody that you thought was weird or different, and they asked you to go do something and you didn't want to do it? Okay, if all of those people out there were abusers, can you imagine what this world would look like? If you were a victim of somebody that you didn't want to go to a movie with or do something with, okay? I mean, he doesn't even say that James Charles asked him in a sexual way. He just said, he texted me and asked me if I wanted to come over for a movie. I don't know about you, but isn't that kind of what friends do? He said in the video, and now people are going to be like, well, Jeff didn't know what to do in that situation. Jeff didn't know what to do in the situation. Jeff said if he ever hit on him, he would hit him in the face or he would run out of the room. Jeff sat in a video and made it very clear he wasn't interested in it, and told him, Jeff, okay, there wasn't going to, at that point, with the story, I don't think you guys remember how big the story was. James Charles, if he would have come out and said Jeff Wittek was a homophobe, Jeff had just done the video with James Charles sitting there talking about how James had a crush on him and it wasn't reciprocated, and that they were just friends. And the whole thing was a joke for the internet. There was no situation that was going to happen where if James Charles came out and called Jeff Wittek a homophobe, anybody was going to believe it. That was not going to happen. Nowhere was that going to happen. I'm going off of facts. I'm somebody that goes off of facts, not speculation, okay? I'm talking about facts. In a situation like this, I sometimes will speculate about beauty influencer drama and things like that, but this is very serious, okay? This is why James Charles has a career today. So James could easily come out and say, yeah, I just asked a friend over for watch a movie. It was nothing more than that. I mean, we were friends. Yeah, we had hung out, so I didn't think it was a big deal. And this is why you can't take these allegations seriously, you know? And then he uses that as a way to diminish all the other allegations. I'm not victim shaming because Jeff Wittek never says that he's a victim of James Charles. I don't know how I can be accused of doing something that doesn't even exist, okay? The amounts of people that in here say that I am victim shaming Jeff Wittek. Jeff Wittek never comes out and says that he's a victim of James Charles. And this alone is why I'm making this video. Not to piss off the people that left the comment. Hey, I welcome any comments on my videos, okay? But to prove a point, right? That with very limited information, people have taken this and assumed that I am victim blaming Jeff Wittek, who never even said that he was a victim of James Charles. And now if that story goes on and on and on, I mean, I can probably, since I've made this video, I probably got another comment from somebody saying that I'm victim blaming Jeff Wittek. Hold on a second, let's go back and see what the newest comment is, and see if anybody's left me another comment saying, yeah, oh no, 44 minutes ago was the last comment. Well, actually, the last comment was 14 minutes ago, and it was on James Charles plays the victims when he has victims. And they commented on The Walking Dead. So anyway, yeah, I think, you know, like, this is a very serious situation for me, right? I don't understand why 5 years later, Jeff Wittek, in his season of coming so hard for David Dobrik, which he has a lot of factual evidence to do that, why throw James Charles into the mix of this? You could have helped other people. You know, Tana Mojo talks about all this stuff that she knows about James Charles behind the scenes, but she still follows him, right? Like, you guys could have done a podcast and you could have talked about the victims. You could have brought awareness to the stories of the victims, the 14 and the 16-year-old. You could have brought awareness to all the other straight men that have come out. I mean, Tana Mojo is good friends with one of them. You know, you could have come out and talked about that and how serious those situations are, you know? You didn't have to share your own personal story and make it about you, and now the whole world thinks that Jeff Wittek is a victim of James Charles. Now, the reason why this is dangerous for me and why I wanted to make this video is because, like I said, I made a video a couple weeks ago or a couple days ago where somebody literally took one sentence that I said, well, a bunch of people took one sentence I said and blew it into something that I never said. People all the time come to me and say, well, you said this. I'm like, I absolutely 100% never said that. Well, you insinuated it. No, I didn't. Not at all. No, period, end of story. I did not. You know? And I even came out and clarified myself later. And people don't want to hear that because they hear that initial thing and they take it and they run with it, right? Okay, well, that's dangerous, especially in a situation like this, all right? Where James Charles has identifiable victims that have made allegations with evidence, and James Charles has apologized to his victims that were 14 and 16 at the time, and there are numerous heterosexual men that he has had coercive sexual conversations with, trying to make them believe that they're bisexual, okay? If we go along with this whole idea that Jeff Wittek, because I'm victim blaming Jeff Wittek, and Jeff Wittek is a victim of James Charles because James Charles simply asked him to come over and watch a movie and some other weird shit that Jeff Wittek won't come out and say, James Charles can easily use that as a defense and say, well, the reason why people want to believe that I'm a predator when there's no truth to it whatsoever is because of blah, 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 blah. And here's another example. Jeff Wittek, I texted him and asked him if he wanted to, you know, come over and watch a movie, and then he turns it into all this 5 years later when his views are down and all that kind of stuff. Now, this is a situation that doesn't look good, right? And this is a situation where James Charles could say something, and then what are people going to believe? And people are going to believe James Charles, right? And they're going to use this as an example, and they're going to go, damn, yeah, like, I've texted people and asked them for movies, to go to movies. I've texted people that I liked or I had crushes on and asked them to movies. I've asked people that I was friends with, and people have said no, you know? And I'm not James Charles, so he must not be that bad either. Well, if he's not bad in this situation, Jeff Wittek is saying he's really bad, then that can't be true. If that's not true, then all these other things are true. This is why James Charles still has a platform today, okay? I'm not saying that Jeff Wittek doesn't have the ability to come out and share his story, all right? I just don't think there's much of a story, all right? I watched the podcast. If you're going to judge me for what I said in my video, please do the same research that I did. Please watch the video where Jeff Wittek talks about it, all right? Where he talks about the fact that the only thing that James Charles did was text him to ask him to come over and watch a movie and some other weird shit that he won't even say what that is. He just says some other weird shit. Tana asks him to clarify. She goes, what other weird shit? And he goes, I never let it go that far. Well, then, what are you talking about? You never went to an escape room? You never let it, was it sexual? Was it he wanted to ask you over to eat pizza? I mean, you don't say in there what it is, right? So then that lets our minds run with it, okay? This is in no way me victim shaming Jeff Wittek, because Jeff Wittek isn't a victim. He never even implies that he's a victim. He never even says that he's a victim of James Charles. I can't victim shame somebody that's not a victim. I can't, okay? Period, end of story. And the fact that so many people ran there and took it was why this is so serious, okay? And why this is so dangerous. Because this is exactly what has happened for the last 8 years that I have been on YouTube, okay? Is that we mishear and misunderstand things, and we go with what's this and what's this. And the takedown of James Charles is so popular, right? In the public eye, it's so popular that we want to believe anything. We want to take it and run with it. So be careful what you're saying. I wasn't victim shaming Jeff Wittek. I don't blame Jeff Wittek for anything, okay? Nothing at all, because he's not a victim. He even says that. The most that happened was that James Charles hit him up to watch a movie, period, end of story. But now it's gone to that Peter Monn is victim blaming Jeff Wittek, who is a victim of James Charles. And that could be used by James Charles as a defense to all the other allegations. It's happened before, and we're literally handing him an explanation on a silver platter to get out of further trouble down the road. And it's very, very dangerous. That's why I came on here tonight to address this. I thought it was important to talk about this. I appreciate people sharing things in my comment sections. When people bring things to me and they say, hey, you said this, like, and you know, it was heard this way and it was implied this way. I listen. I'm like, well, I can understand how somebody could take it that way and hear it that way, that what I said, you know, and maybe I plan to come out and address that because I think that is important that it came out that way. And what I said, I never said that. I never implied that. But maybe people took it that way to clarify my stance on that. When people have said things in my past about maybe you need to rethink the stance, I've come out and I've I've looked at it and reevaluated it and come out with my stance and said, yes, I either agree with what I said earlier or no, I've changed my opinion and thank you for bringing it to me. I learn things from you guys all the time, right? But as somebody that's been very carefully watching this for 7 years, you know, I think this is a really dangerous situation. And I'm not blaming Jeff Wittek or Tana Mojo for that. But for me on the outside looking in, it looks like it was fodder for a podcast, okay? They literally used his picture and used his name as a title for the podcast when they talk about it for 4 minutes, all right? I mean, that's very dangerous. The allegations of James Charles go so deep. They go so past him just texting somebody and asking them if they want to go to a movie, right? And Jeff Wittek takes that to the place of, well, like, I could have sucked his dick. And I'm like, did he ever ask you to? Tana Mojo even says that. Did he ever ask? She says something like, did he even ask you to? And it's like, he goes, well, I never let it go there with, like, when she says, what other weird shit? I never let it go there. Well, did he ever ask you? Because that's a different conversation. If James Charles made sexual advances on Jeff Wittek after Jeff Wittek knew or had stated and done videos with him and whatever, uncomfortable or not uncomfortable, okay? Then that's a completely different conversation. But if James Charles never said that, and James Charles only said, do you want to come over to my house and watch a movie? And I don't understand then why you would dedicate an hour and 4 minute long podcast all around James Charles when he's 4 minutes of the podcast to his name, put his picture in the video title, if you had that kind of evidence. And if you're sitting on that kind of evidence 5 years later coming out and sharing your story, I don't care what anybody's excuse is, I think it's time to share that story. I think it's time to share that story, okay? And expose James Charles fully for what he did to you. But if all he did was text you and ask you to come over for a movie, that's giving him an excuse later to say none of these allegations are true. And he's already done that. And it's dangerous because James Charles knows how to play that game, right? And if this happens again to James Charles down the road, he can say, and he'll point to Jeff Wittek and he'll say, Jeff Wittek accused me of himself being a victim because I asked him to come over and meet a movie. And see, this is what happens to me all the time. And I have to deal with this all the time. I text people, you want to go to an escape room, you want to go to dinner, you want to go to a movie, and then they take it in a different way. This is why people think that these allegations are true. And it's going to give him the excuse. And he's going to get away with it if he does something bad again. This is why it's dangerous. It's why these situations that I talk about on here are very, very serious to me, right? I'm totally open to somebody coming to my video and saying, hey, this feels a little victim blaming to me. And I can see from you watching my video earlier that you might have felt that way. Okay, but let's go back in and revisit the evidence. Jeff Wittek never came out and said that he was a victim of James Charles. So if Jeff Wittek never came out and said that he was a victim of James Charles, how am I victim blaming? And then if we take that and we run with it, what we're going to remember in our head is that Jeff Wittek came out and said that he was a victim of James Charles because Peter was victim blaming in a video. It's very dangerous, and I'm not going to be part of that narrative. And I am not going to be part of giving James Charles an excuse down the road, which is why I needed to come out and make this video. Please continue to leave comments on my videos, whether you agree with me or disagree with me. You educate me, and I think it's an important conversation to have, and I hope that a lot of you watch this all the way through. Anyway, I love you guys so much. The Outside Summer videos are back. I love you guys, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.